Welcome. I'm Debra Ann Clement, and thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Shortcut to the Soul. Today's topic. Today I want to do an introductory lesson to the meaning of the North and South nodes in the horoscope. And so I'm focusing on the meaning. I'm not getting into the technical aspects of what the nodes are and, that they're points in space. Seriously, look it up. Google it. I want to talk and just help some of you with interpreting it, because that's a request, quite frankly, I've gotten from a number of you, is some information about the nodes. So there's the North Node and the South Node. When I sit down and I'm going to interpret the nodes, I look at the South Node first. Why? Because the South Node, well, to me, that is your soul's resume. It does describe, the past experiences. It includes gifts, talents, abilities, some that you have mastered, right? And they come naturally to you. But it also represents lessons that your soul has mastered, as well as lessons that may still be in progress. Because here's the reality. We do not master every lesson in a lifetime. We just don't. It can take several lifetimes. And I know, many of you have heard me say this before, and I'm going to repeat it again, because before we get something right, we get plenty of opportunities to get it wrong. That's where the free will comes in. And that's the reason, too, why many people, if we're reading a chart and we talk about, past life or the South Node, and they say, what are you kidding? And I've had this you're talking, this is my present life. Don't tell me that was the past life. My God, I'm experiencing that in the here and now. Yes, you are. And why is it familiar? Because yes, you have dealt with it in a past life. Why is it repeating in this life? Because you didn't get it right. And there's no shame in that, because we all are a work in progress, right? So the South Node, again, things that come naturally to you, they're familiar, and that is why we gravitate towards them. So we do lean on our South Node, and to be honest with you, that's okay, because the truth is that we are supposed to have these gifts and these abilities in this lifetime, and we are supposed to lean on them to a point as we evolve towards our North Node. The key is not to get stuck there. Truth be told, most of us do get stuck there. We get stuck there for quite some time. And, my experience, and God, I'm doing this good 30 years now, okay, of reading charts, is that when it comes to the North Node and, people, clients, myself included, really getting to that North Node, those North Node lessons where we're getting some success, let me put it that way, and we're going into that territory, I really find 45 is when people really start thinking about actively pursuing it. If it's before then, it's like kudos. I'm impressed. I mean, over the years, I've had a couple of clients under 40, and I just God bless them. God bless them. They saw it and they're on that path, more evolved certainly than I. But to get back, so the South Node. We can lean on it a little bit as we're evolving towards our North Node. And we do resist the North Node. And as I said, I look at the South Node first, and then I look at the North Node. And so what are we resisting? And it is true that the North Node, to some degree, is, we say, uncharted territory for the soul. And it's not that it's totally, again, uncharted territory. It does represent a lesson that has not been mastered. So that's why we say the North Node is what the soul aspires to, or it's the soul's aspiration. So in a way, I guess you could say that the North Node is the soul's destiny or the soul's mission. Really doesn't matter, but as long as you get the meaning of it, that's where you're going. And of course, the North and South nodes, right, they oppose each other. They work in a pair. And so when you look in the chart, they are always in opposite signs, and they fall across a pair of houses. So when it comes to interpreting them, and I'm going to start with the signs. And yeah, I think that's what I want to do today, because that's probably, I want to give you a snapshot, and I want to be really clear. Tip of the iceberg, okay? But let's talk about the nodes and how they express themselves. So let us start. Let's see. Is there anything else? Oh, there's something else I want to say. So the South Node. If you look at the signs, what do the signs represent? Well, the sign that the South Node is in, you could look at that as the soul's, sort of the soul's spiritual consciousness. All right. It's the consciousness or the beliefs that the soul has gained through, I'm going to say that through their experiences that have occurred in past lives and has now brought them into this life where that South Node is located. And the house that the South Node, is located very often will describe circumstances, situations, experiences that the soul has a lot of experience in. In some case, it has mastered. And so very often the house where the South Node is located, there may be life areas there where you tend to get stuck. Because like I say, it's comfortable. It's familiar. So we tend to be attracted to these similar situations. Okay, so it may not really be conscious, but we actually do tend to seek them out because, again, it's sort of like we have experience. We kind of like know what we're doing there. And of course, then there is the North Node. And so with the North Node, that's the consciousness of your soul as it's here, as it's come to evolve. Okay, it's about the consciousness of making a shift in this lifetime. Shifting consciousness. Yeah, I'll call it that. Let's go with that. Okay. And so it has this idea in some respect of what it is here to learn, right? And it's going to have the opportunity to gain the experiences that will ultimately enable us to make the shift and learn the lesson, usually through the life areas described by the house that the North Node is located in. And again, you're going to get many opportunities to get it wrong before you get it right. So let us talk about the signs, and let's start with Aries and Libra. So if the North and South nodes are in Aries and Libra, and for this moment I'm going to say it doesn't make a difference if the North node is in Aries and the South node is in Libra, or the North node is in Libra and the South node is in Aries. If you see that pair, at least when I see that pair, I know, yeah, there's a lesson here, certainly spiritual lessons about what? Well, put it under the big heading of relationship. Now, when you're looking at it and you think about, I want to just say Aries, right? Aries and Libra, Aries is, right, the I am. Libra is about the partnership, the union. It's, Aries is independent. Libra is about cooperation, right? Working and playing well with others. And so on some level, there's going to be a lesson for the soul in this lifetime that is going to be connected to balance. If it is not literally in relationships, though quite frankly, usually very often does show up there, it is definitely connected to balance or to giving and receiving. All right, so just to keep that in mind. But there'll be some type of a theme connected to that in this lifetime. Now, let's say it's Taurus and Scorpio. When I see Taurus and Scorpio, and again, going to say this, don't care which one's a North node, which is a South node. I see Taurus and Scorpio. There is a theme in this lifetime, a lesson somehow connected to productivity. Okay? Thought I was going to say money, right? That can be part of it. This is just like I say, it's a snapshot, but I'm going to tell you productivity. Because when you think of the two signs, all right, because how did I come up with productivity? Well, Taurus, and seriously, Taurus is the most productive sign in the zodiac. And yes, it does rule the second house, and it is about money. And Scorpio is also about money. But Scorpio is also very productive. They're both productive signs, but they do it differently. Okay, Taurus is more about the, what do we say, the my money, or I earn my money. And with Scorpio, we like to say it's like my money, your money. It's a little bit misleading because Scorpio is also about shared assets. And so when it comes, and it's also about, sources of money that come to Scorpio, that Scorpio is not necessarily out there, hitting the brick, so to speak. And So to me, it is about productivity. And I hate to say it's about working, sometimes it's doing things the hard way versus working smarter. So if I'm talking about productivity, I will mention it in that respect, because sometimes there's a theme there. Security and risk taking. All right, that's something else. Maybe that's a way to put it. So I'm talking about productivity, but it's that balance of security versus risk taking. And that can very often come out as a theme, quite frankly, connected to money, connected to resources. Because Taurus and Scorpio are both signs connected to resources. So when you look at Taurus and Scorpio, you might want to think of a theme of resources. That would certainly be very accurate as well. And some a little bit clearer cut than others. Now, whether it's productivity or whether it's resources, you'll find that out really from the rest of the chart. And after I go through the signs, I'll talk a little bit about that. And so for Taurus and Scorpio. Now, let's talk about Gemini and Sagittarius. Now, I'll tell you, Gemini and Sagittarius, when you see the nodes, it's not that clear cut. Can definitely be a theme connected to knowledge, intelligence, right? It's definitely, in a word, I would say awareness. Okay, I would just use the general term awareness. And the reason I say it's not that clear. Both signs, Gemini and Sagittarius, they are both connected with communications, different aspects, right? And certainly they're both connected to travel, both connected to, I mentioned the education, right? The knowledge and things of that nature. So the difference, though, they're both connected to the mind and to learning. But Gemini, right? Gemini is the concrete mind, and Sagittarius is the theoretical mind. Gemini, the key phrase is I think. Sagittarius, it's I understand. So you see the difference there, right? So they are both connected to information. And here's the thing, they're both connected to communications on different levels, though. And they're both connected, again, to teaching. So that's why I say, it's broader with Gemini and Sagittarius. And sometimes, I'll be honest with you, it could be a little bit trickier. So when I'm seeing Gemini and Sagittarius, sometimes, and I will look for the chart for validation for it, there can be an issue in this life of a theme of not being taken seriously. All right. There can also very often be the issue, and I mentioned concrete mind and theoretical mind, where it has to do with focus. There is a theme or a lesson, life lessons between where in this lifetime you may have to pull it together. Be a little bit more facts, be a little bit more logical, be a little bit more, when I use the word narrow, I don't mean rigid, but more focused. Whereas you may be here really to learn with the Sagittarius side, to be more tolerant, to be more open, to be more broad-minded and look at the bigger picture. All right. The houses that these signs will fall across are very important in really seeing which area is it. But I am going to say to you, intelligence and also education in terms of credentials can very often be a theme for someone who's got the North and South node in Gemini and Sagittarius, whether they could be the eternal student who just keeps going to school and school and school and school and is like never ready to go out in the real world because I need another degree. Okay. And then you can have, the other, extreme of someone where, it's just, I'm not saying they blow off education, but they can be, the lesson is the opposite. Okay. That, hey, you do need some training. You're really just not I hate to say, not a know-it-all. You can't always just learn it from life, but there's very often, more than one thing going on when it is Gemini and Sagittarius. When the nodes fall in Cancer and Capricorn, what is the theme? And I'm just going to say Cancer and Capricorn. Well, you've got nurturing, you've got authority. At least that's how I look at it. And certainly, if we talk about the houses they rule, well, it's the home, the family, and we've got, right, the Capricorn is, the public life and the career. So the other side with Cancer and Capricorn, besides nurturing and authority, you can look at it as saying, is there a theme here with the inner life? And we can say the outer life, I'm going to say the public life. And again, it's going to depend on the houses, that they fall across. But there's something going on in the person's life, and depending on where the nodes are. So, and I'm just going to, I'll stop and give an example here and just say, if you're looking at a north node with Capricorn, all right, there's usually a lesson where they're evolving to. It is about becoming an expert, an authority in some area. It may be about going in and doing something that you've given freely to nurture, okay, the Cancer side, that it's time to go out there and make it a profession. So just as a simple, just a really short example. Now, Cancer and Capricorn. So next you get to Leo and Aquarius, and Leo and Aquarius is interesting. So what do I think of when I see the nodes in Leo and Aquarius? I think of love. Yeah, didn't expect that one either, right? Okay, love. Why? Well, because they're both about love. Leo is, right, it's passionate, it's personal love, it's romantic love, right? Okay, Aquarius is universal love. They're both about love. The thing is, Leo is that passion, it's personal. Aquarius has that detachment. And that's also a theme. When I see Leo and Aquarius, I know there's some area, depending on which signs and nodes are in, where someone takes something too personally or needs, or on the flip side, okay, is it that they may need to get credit in this lifetime? Do they need to learn how to be the anonymous giver? Is there a lesson connected to that, or lessons again of detachment, not taking everything, personally? And so that's part of it. Now, the other thing, of course, about Leo and Aquarius is it's also signs. As the signs, they are very much creative. They're creative signs, certainly. And if you think about the key phrases, Leo is I will. Aquarius is I know. Very different, right? Very different. But they're fixed signs. And so when you are looking at the pairs of signs, sometimes it's actually helpful. I'm going to say to you to look at those key phrases, because you may want to just say, especially if you're looking at the North Node, where are you going? Well, if it's a Leo North Node, you may look at that and look in the terms of I will, okay? And if it is the Aquarius, a little bit of the, I know type of an energy, and give that some thought in connection to the houses that it falls in. Now, the other thing I do want to say about the creativity part of it with Leo and Aquarius, because they're both about self-expression, but that's the difference, because creativity, we're always expressing ourselves. But the difference again with Leo is it's just much more personal. It's expressing myself, but being in that spotlight as well. Whereas with Aquarius, when we think of Aquarius creativity, and we tend to think of inventions and vision and cutting edge things, it's more along the universal of bettering, I have to say maybe more brotherhood, say bettering mankind, or at least not just about the individual glory. So let me just think. Okay, I'm just going to go someplace else for a second. Let's talk about Virgo and Pisces for a moment. So Virgo and Pisces, think about, and here I'm going to use the key phrases as well. Virgo is I analyze, and Pisces is I believe. Put those across the chart in two houses and consider that. Because whether it's the past or whether it's the where you're going in the future, that Virgo energy, it is very much about analysis. It's facts. Show me the facts, right? Pisces, hey, I believe Pisces is about faith. So that is something, to keep in mind as well, that when I'm looking at Virgo and Pisces, I know that very often there can be a theme or an issue in life that has to do with faith, whether one needs more faith, whether one needs to rely a little bit more, get into the facts, all right? But there's an issue there. Now, Virgo and Pisces, they're both connected to service. They're also both connected to sacrifice. And I know Pisces is really the sign, right, connected to sacrifice, and also, it can be a martyr. But the truth of the matter is Virgo can be as well. And, in terms of even being victims, Pisces is the sign right? That rules, the Neptune, the victims. But Virgo can end up becoming a victim by, I'm just going to say over-serving. So there's a lot of common ground there, similar to Gemini and Sagittarius, as they share a lot of ground. And hey, Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo, and Pisces, they're mutable signs, right? They're flexible, they're adaptable. So with Virgo and Pisces as well, where the themes are, the rest of the chart comes into play. Now, they also are connected to health. Virgo may be more about the physical health, Pisces the emotional or the spiritual health, but it can also be connected to health. And so you'd be looking at that. Now, you look at the signs, and by all means, you look at the meaning of the signs. Are they in the South Node? Are they in the North Node? And you really kind of, to me, it's rather simple. You're sort of applying it to either the past experiences or to the future, where you're supposed to be evolving to. And what you will usually find, okay, I shouldn't say usually, I want to say always, but I guess, right, nothing is 100%. But I will say this, if you're looking at the South Node and you look at those South Node traits, let's say, connected to the sign, the individual, whatever talents, whatever abilities, whatever interests are connected to the sign, the individual in this current life, some of them are going to come easily. And if you look at the houses, what life areas does the house rule? You're going to see that usually from pretty young in life, from young in life, I mean teens, 20s, 30s even, there's involvement in those life areas. You look at the sign in the North Node, and of course, you're not going to see the same thing. But once a person gets to a certain age, and that's why I say if someone's in their teens, 20s, sometimes even in their 30s, may not really relate to it, and that's okay. And that's why many times I'll say, when I do read young people in their 20s, I will say to them, a lot of what I'm saying is going to resonate with you, and some of it just may not resonate at all. And so when you're in your 40s and it does, think of me, and seriously. And I speak this from experience because quite honestly, like when I was much younger and I'm talking my teens, my 20s even, and looking at my own chart, there was a lot of ability. There was a big, strong theme of teaching, okay? Teaching. And also law. Now, people who know me back from when I was younger, really, they can vouch for this. Law. Oh my God, I was a secretary and I would not work for attorneys. I mean, I thought, law. And teaching, when I was in high school, I worked as a teacher's aide for 2 summers. And after doing that, I realized I could never teach. I could never work. I just was not for me. And so, fast forward, things happen, experience happens. And, right, I graduate law school at 40. And shortly, within a couple of years of graduating from law school, now I did teach astrology a little bit before then, but I really wasn't considering that like teaching. But in my 40s, I did start teaching, and I was teaching some contract law and just some simple seminars for somewhere in real estate, to real estate people, to contract law, leases, things of that nature. And also I was doing some seminars on, again, with real estate. At that time, it was condos, co-ops, teaching people, what are you buying and the difference. But the truth is, I ended up teaching. And of course, listen, I've been teaching astrology for years. 3 years of anchored in astrology. I had a lot of guests who were with me, but I did a lot of teaching. I do a lot of teaching here, and I'm just going to mention here, it's all for free. But I mention that because that is the part of me, because I do believe in giving back. Not to say there aren't going to be courses coming out that I'll charge for, but it is about that giving back. But the point is the teaching, I never would have thought I would have taught anything. And as for law, I mean, seriously, if anyone had said to me, someday you're going to go to law school, well, I can't use the language that I probably would have said to them, like, you are out of your, mind. And again, it's the same thing, with the mediumship. We need to have the reason we do resist our North Node because it is, it's new, let's say. But the other side of it is that, to be honest with you, even when we're drawn to it, and that's what I was going to say to you, if you're talking to somebody, look at their North Node, look at the sign and look at the house it falls in those areas. Persons usually, they're drawn to it in some way. Now, they might be resisting it, but the point is this, they react to it, okay? They react strongly to it. It's not just, take it or leave it. It's usually like, no, like, I can't stand it, all right? Or, again, some people feel like, I want to do it, but I couldn't do it, or, things like that. But you'll see that when you look at it. So I just wanted to mention that as well. Now, when it comes to interpreting, now the next step normally I'd be saying, oh, right. So then you look at the houses and the life areas, and you do. And I encourage you to do that, especially North and South Node. This is new to you. Look at the houses. I think in the premiere episode, I did talk about the houses in that episode, and I go through the meaning, and, you can find it, a million other places as well. But look at those life areas. However, for those of you who are a bit more advanced, you have the South Node, you have the North Node, you look at the signs, you look at the houses, all right? And I'm going to talk a little bit more, I'll say about the houses, but let me just say this. If you want to get more information about the South Node and the North Node, you go to them and you look at their sign. Let's say it's the South Node, and let's pretend South Node is in Taurus. So you have your South Node in Taurus, you've got your traits, you might even have the house. You want to look at the ruler of the South Node. So if your South Node is in Taurus, that ruler is Venus. You want more information about the soul's past? You look to Venus, and here you go. Oh, you've got Venus. Let's say it's in Pisces in the 9th house. Well, you're going to analyze, that Venus in Pisces in the 9th house. All right. And the truth is, really, if you want to know more, you're also looking at aspects. You're starting, in fact, I didn't want to get too confusing, but really I should take a step back. You want to know more about the North and South Node. Yes, you start with the sign, you look at the house, you look at the aspects to the North and South Node. And then, you go to the ruler of the North and South Node, and you do the same analysis. You analyze those ruling planets by sign, by house, and by aspect. Okay? So, take another step back, and because I got ahead of myself there. You want to know more about the North and South Node. You've looked at the signs, you've looked at the house. Let's talk about the aspects. You're going to look at every aspect to the North Node. Now, how wide an orb do you use? This is a point of debate, all right? And I know a lot of people use very tight orbs, and a few astrologers I know will say, oh, I've got definitely nothing over 3 degrees. So I'm not one of them. I look at the orbs. I actually will go as far as 7 degrees. And the reason that I do is because I used to use a much smaller orb. And the truth of the matter is, over the years of reading clients, I would just mention it because I'd sometimes be close, like, right, it's supposed to be 3 degrees, but what if it's 3.5 degrees? And, things would come up. And so I would just say to them, you have this wide square or this wide trine, and let me just throw this out to you. And over the years, what I've really found is that the degree may be wide, according to the rules of astrology, but you'd be surprised how many times a person says, oh my God, that fits me. Yes. And they would back it up with, whatever the reason was. And so you lose nothing by considering it. And if you're working with clients, and this is my attitude, if I say it to you, let's say I'm reading you and I say, hey, it's a little wide, and you say, no, it doesn't fit me. So great. It doesn't fit you. Like, what's the big deal? And I've learned something. But what I have learned over the years is that the wider orb with the North Node, very often, the person, it does matter. So you are, of course, looking at the aspects, and every planet, let's talk about the planets, that aspects the North Node. Well, if it's a trine, if it's a sextile, it's being supported as well, okay? And if it is a square or an opposition or a conjunction, right, there's a whole different theme here going on. Now, the same can be said to the south, for the South Node. But the difference is this: when you're analyzing the aspects to the south node as well as to the south node ruler, all of the information that you're getting, what was easy, what was the flow, where were the challenges, that is the past, okay? When you're doing it for the north node, it's what is the soul aspiring to? Where is the soul going? How easy is it? How difficult is it? Where are there challenges? All right? Where are the challenges in the person's, in the person's life? Because every planet that connects by aspect to the node is influencing it. Okay? And so it's the nature of the planet. If it's Jupiter, if it's a nice flow, great. It's expanding it, right? We all love Jupiter. Well, what if it's squaring it? Jupiter, the negative side, it's exaggeration, it's excess. So there can be, if Jupiter's squaring the north node, there can be an issue here where the person could bite off too much than they chew, or they could be wasting opportunities. So, interpretation is something that honestly, it takes years. I mean, we all start out, I did anyway, and I always say this, I started out with cookbook astrology. And so people can knock cookbook astrology all they want. That's great. That's their opinion. Worked for me. It's all also how we learn. But that was the basis. And so however you learn, okay, whether someone's teaching you, whether you're looking it up in books, and March and McEvers, I always say it's the only way to learn astrology series. I mean, that's really, people say, how did you teach yourself astrology? And in terms of, it was books. And that was certainly one of the series when it came to natal astrology. But anyway, the point I want to say is it does come from practice. It comes from reading everybody's charts. I can't stress this enough. I really can't. And for those of you who, want to become professionals, maybe you're starting or you're a little nervous. Here's the deal. The biggest thing you have to overcome, I think, is the fact that you are not going to be right with everything you say. And the truth is you might hit some things on the money, and sometimes people don't connect it, or they just maybe don't want to own up to it. And here's the reality is you are going to be wrong sometimes. Not everything you say is going to connect. Simple as that. And I'm doing this how many years? And my clients out there, I say to them routinely, especially if there's some things I'm like, I wonder. And I'll say to them, whatever it is, and I'll say, listen, if it doesn't fit, like, don't hesitate. If you don't agree, don't hesitate, because I'm not perfect. And I'm not perfect. I'm not God. Nobody is. And that's all there is to it. So in that sense, I feel like you got to get over yourself, quite honestly, and get over that fear, because nobody is right all the time. Anybody who says they're just believing their own fiction. And that's it. That's my 2 cents. So again, reading as many charts as you can really does help. If the nodes, so when you think about this, interpreting the nodes, and we usually read about the signs and the houses. And so I'm not saying to you that that's not enough for your purpose, but I do want to really just make you aware that the nodes and the signs are fine. And the aspects, because that's the other step, and you'll see that written up some places as well. But I don't see as much emphasis on, and maybe I just haven't seen it. But certainly when I was learning, I didn't really see much of an emphasis on saying, hey, look at that south node and north node ruler and do the whole analysis again. And I know it seems like a lot of work. And quite frankly, hey, it is. But if you really want the full story of your south node and the full story of that north node, you got to do the work. And that's why I say anyone, when it comes to astrology, because I get asked a lot to teach astrology. I'm always being asked to teach astrology, like a beginner's class. And I don't know if I ever will, to be honest with you, do a real beginner's class. And the thing about astrology is this. For those of you who are familiar with your chart, for those of you who are like interested and you just want to learn more, it's a calling. You're called to astrology because there is such a complexity to astrology. There is so much to it. Believe me, if it's not something, I feel like in your chart that you are called And that's why beginning classes, everyone starts and that's like, oh my God, I don't want to do all this. And there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it either. But it is, it is. There's a lot of detail. There's a lot of detail to astrology. So I talked briefly, snapshot, literally snapshot, just a few words about the signs. And so the next step really would be to look at the houses. And so snapshot just for the houses. And I will say to you, if the north and south nodes, if they fall across house 1 and 7, axis of relationships. Okay, so there is something going on with relationships. Now, it might be more of the giving and the receiving rather than, let's say, a romantic relationship. Now, I mentioned earlier, I said the rest of the chart will tell you. So the 1st and 7th, or when the nodes fall in Aries and Libra, it's kind of, I don't want to say it's easy, but if the person is here to learn about relationships, and look, let me be clear, to some degree, every single one of us is here to learn about relationships. It's just some people major in it, and relationships could be family relationships, could be romantic relationships. How do you know the difference, right? Well, you're going to look at the chart, because if it's a romantic issue, all right, marriage, partnership, look at Venus. Is Venus retrograde? Look at Juno. Is Juno retrograde? Look at the aspects to Venus and to Juno. Are they besieged by Saturn? Just for example, look at the 7th house. Look at the 5th house. Look at the planets there. If there are signs where this is not a really easy road, then it's clear. This 1st and 7th house, where they fall, part of it is definitely about relationships. The Aries and Libra, then it's more of the romantic relationships. But if you do not see it connected to romance, but let's say that 4th house, there's a lot going on in the 4th house or the 10th house. 4th and 10th houses, axis of, right? Well, actually it's the axis of destiny. I had forgotten about that. I was reading some old notes that I had, and I thought, oh, wow, I forgot I said that once. But the point is that for the relationships, well, it might be about parents. It could be the family ties, all right? Those are the lessons you came here. The person came here to learn about relationships. And it could be authority figures. It could possibly be connected, to work. But so if it's in the 1st and 7th house, I'm just going to say you definitely look to relationships, and you can Aries and Libra, you can look as well, excuse me, to see if it is connected to, to those personal relationships. If it falls across the 2nd and 10th house, there's a lesson to be learned about money. So here I'm going to talk about money I'm going to say resources. And it's resources. It's the theme connected on some level between the my money and the our money. But it's also about savings versus debt. When people have the nodes falling across the 2nd and 8th house, and depending on where they fall, there can be either lessons connected to handling money, managing money, like I say, managing the resources, all right? And of course, the sharing. Now, 8th house I want to mention because it's also a house of intimacy. All right, it's intimacy and it's trust. And the 2nd house, it's our values. Who and what means the most to us? And what do we value? Do we value trust the most? Do we value money the most? And so again, that might be some type of a theme going on in the life. And again, how do you know for sure? Okay, you'll get the validation from the rest of the chart because, look at Venus, look at, Pluto, look at the rulers of those houses. Whatever houses, let me put it this way, whatever axis that the nodes fall across, you can also look at the rulers. I didn't say that earlier, but that's what I'm saying. There's so much to astrology. You can look at the rulers of those houses and see what their condition is like. But just look and see, and it has to do with money and resources. Certainly look at Venus, certainly look at Pluto, because it is the ruler, the natural ruler, of the 8th house. And let us see. 3rd and 9th house. So 3rd and 9th house is tricky. I'm going to be honest with you. That to me is a little bit, even to this day when I see it, I'm like, okay, let's see what else is going on in this chart. Because sometimes it may be very much connected to the person. And here I'm going to say the intellect. And when I say the intellect, it can have issues with learning. Now, I'm not saying necessarily learning disabilities, but there can be something there connected to the past, even a past life. And again, that not being taken seriously, right? Not getting credit for one's ideas. Okay. One's, I say one's intelligence, but one's ideas. And also with the 3rd and the 9th, we do have travel in there. But to me, it's a little bit more about travel, the expansion. I do feel it's much more connected to knowledge and to the mind than necessarily connected, to literally to, I'm going to say to you, to the physical travel. The other thing about the 3rd and 9th, though, 3rd is side-by-side relationships. There's your siblings, there's your cousins, there's your neighbors. 9th house, brings in actually in-laws, brings in, I think, in-laws. They put them under there. But the point is, so that 3rd and 9th house, that could have something to do, with relationships. But 3rd and 9th are also very much connected to communications. And so there can be some type of a theme in life connected to communications. It's also the local versus the long distance. So, is someone living a life too small? Is someone have to leave home? Maybe that's part of their lesson. It's like, hey, you gotta get out of Dodge. Look at the rest of the chart to find these type of issues. Now, if it falls across the 4th and the 10th, it's a parental axis. Very often, there are issues with home and family, and sometimes it is that issue of my family's holding back and I need to go out and be in the public life, for example, or, hey, I need to learn how to do family. I need to learn how to do home and family. It's natural for me to, work and be successful, but, my domestic life, is a shambles. That's where I need to learn a lesson. And 4 and 10 is the axis of destiny. I think I'm going to start using that again and the reason is this, the 10th house is a career and the calling, but it is associated with destiny. The 4th house is a destiny as well, because it's our parents. We choose our parents. All right, at least I believe it. So if I believe I have chosen my parents, that is, destiny. So 4th and 10th, that is something, like I say, also the inner life versus the outer life, the professional life. 5 and 11. So 5 and 11, creativity. Now, 5th house is also children. 11th house, stepchildren. And so sometimes depending, and again, this is really going to depend on the rest of the chart, but it can be issues connected to children in this lifetime. And creative, we say creativity, and that does, that does include children. And so there can be something connected, a theme connected to children or relationships with children in this lifetime. And it can also, though, 11th house, also children of our heart. That's why I say they're not biological, children, but they could be, your neighbor's kids, your nieces, your nephews. And, they're related to you, right? But they're not your own offspring. They're offspring. But the other thing I find about the 5th house and the 11th house, all right, 5th house is love given, 11th house is love received. So there can be, again, lessons given about loving and receiving, giving and receiving love. And by that, I mean, it might be a lesson, for example, if the North Node is in the 5th house, a person may need to, when I say to learn, it's about the giving love, but in the North Node being in the 11th house, it's about the receiving. It can also be about asking for help. I'm just going to mention that because 5th and 11th, the 5th house at the end of the day, though, it is that Leo house. And so with the North Node in the 5th house, there is this lesson of learning to give and to give to the right people, okay? But it's also about getting credit, getting attention in this lifetime, all right? Because if the South Node is in the 11th house, the soul has pretty much mastered like working as a team and sharing credit. So the North Node, I'm just going to say being, in the 11th house, the person needs to learn a little bit more about being that team player and, sharing the accolades, so to speak, or maybe doing something as, anonymously just for the self-satisfaction, that you can get from that. So also, like I say, that 5th house, when I say it's the personal, it's more about the individual attention, where the 11th house, it is the group. It's also group relationships. So that's something I'm just going to say, just throwing a whole bunch of different things out there. And then the 6th and the 12th houses. So excuse me, 6th and 12th, service, sacrifice, health, both connected to animals, by the way. 6th house is like our pets, domesticated. 12th house, animals and the wildlife. I mean, so you can see there's really a lot of different things you can look at here. So when you have the nodes falling across the 6th and the 12th house, personally, I do find there are issues connected to service and sacrifice. And the service and sacrifice tends to be the selfless giving, okay? Because one side, the 12th house, it is about service, it's selfless giving. It doesn't have to always be sacrifice, but to me, it's about selfless service. 6th house to me is more practical service. And so there usually is an issue with service where, depending on how the nodes fall, either this person has to learn to give more selflessly, okay? Or they have to learn to, it could be boundaries, but it could also just be about giving service and getting paid for this service, okay? So that's something that I want to say. Health can also certainly be a role here. But again, that you're going to have to look, besides analyzing the nodes, you want to look at the 6th and the 12th house. What's the condition of the house? What's the condition of those rulers? All right, to get a better feel on, is this lesson more about work? Is this lesson more about health? And the aspects between planets will show that, as well. So, excuse me. So there's a lot to go. There's a lot. That's all I can say. There's a lot when it comes to analyzing the nodes. But I wanted to give you just for those of you who are not familiar with the nodes at all, to give you something to start with, really. And so that's, that I think is about it for today, for an introductory lesson. Because even that, I think, if you're a beginner, can be a little bit of, sometimes be a little bit overwhelming. There's a lot of information, but just take everything a step at a time. And if you start getting overwhelmed with anything, just stop, put it aside a bit, just go back to it. That's all there is to it. But as far as the South Node and the North Node, I guess the last thing I just really want to say about them is that there's really no expiration date. Not that you want to do this for like lifetime and lifetime and lifetime, but sometimes people feel pressured. They really do. It's like, oh, it's my North Node and I'm this age, and it's a work in progress. And that's really how you have to look at it. It's a work in progress. We all resist our North Node. Some resist more than others. In many ways, I certainly did. Okay. And it is what it is. We're here, we learn, we make mistakes, we have successes. Celebrate your successes, learn from your mistakes, and move on. And that's really it. So that's it for this week. I don't know, in the coming months, let me just say this. If a week comes, because I pre-record this, so I don't always get a chance to make the announcement, there may be a couple of weeks coming up in the next few months when Thursday may come and there's no show. And I will post something on Facebook. I will try to note it in my newsletter that there isn't a show, so you don't think like, oh, is she off the air or whatever. But I have a lot going on, a lot of good stuff going on, not complaining, but I just have a lot of client work and, of course, the mediumship. And I really haven't even started really promoting that. But so time is starting to get a little bit tight for me. And quite frankly, at this point in my life, I'm kind of done with working almost like every day, which I still kind of do. I mean, I do love to work. So I'm looking at saying, what has to go? I hate to say that, but kind of like what has to go or what has to change. And so, I love everything I do and I want to sort of keep doing everything, but I just need to get a little bit better organized. And so until I do, like I say, if a show doesn't come out here or there, that's why, that's just the reason why. It just means, hey, Debra didn't have time to sit down and record one. So thank you so much, really, for joining me today. If you enjoy the episodes, please share them. I would appreciate that. Please give it a 5-star review on iTunes or whatever platform, you listen to, because that actually helps it get promoted a little bit and it helps spread, the word. And that's really, these are out there to help educate people. The one thing, and I'm just going to, I don't know, maybe it's obnoxious to point it out, but I'm going to point it out anyway, is that for my shows, my shows are not full of commercials. They're not full of self-promotion. And they're really, it's part of giving back, because I really do believe in that. And so as much as you can share, whoever can benefit, that is, that makes it all worthwhile, quite honestly. So thank you. Until next time, again, I'm Debra Ann Clement. This is Shortcut to the Soul, and may Jupiter's blessings be your constant companion.
We hope you've enjoyed this presentation. To schedule a consultation, please visit DebraClementAstrologer.com.